Marisol Vega's knees buckled the moment the truck door opened and she saw him standing there, hat pulled low, arms crossed like a man bracing for bad news instead of a wife. He didn't move. She didn't either. The wind off the foothills cut sideways through the gravel lot of the Pincher Creek bus depot, and for a second she thought she might just turn around, get back on that Greyhound, and let the whole arrangement collapse before it started. "You're Marisol," he said, not a question, "and you're Declan Whitfield." She shifted her duffel bag higher on her shoulder. "The lawyer said you'd be tall." He didn't mention the scowl. Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close enough that she let herself breathe. She'd pictured an old man, honestly. Someone who needed a marriage of convenience because nobody else would have him. Instead, she was looking at a rancher, maybe 34, 35, broad through the shoulders, sun-weathered in the particular way of someone who spent every daylight hour outside, with eyes the color of strong tea and a wedding band already on his finger that he kept turning with his thumb like it still didn't feel real. "You eat?" he asked. "On the bus, granola bar." She studied him. "You always this chatty." "Not usually." He grabbed her bag before she could protest, grunted at the weight of it. "What've you got in here, Bricks? Everything I own." She said it lightly, but it landed heavier than she meant it to, and she watched him catch that too, watched him decide not to push. The drive out to the ranch took 20 minutes on a gravel road that wound between fields gone gold with late September. Marisol kept her hands folded in her lap and watched the country roll by. Alberta in autumn, all that enormous sky pressing down on land that seemed to go on past the edge of the world. She'd grown up somewhere green and crowded and loud. This silence felt like a held breath. "You don't have to make conversation," Declan said eventually, eyes on the road. "I know this is strange. Strange is one word for it." She turned to look at him. "I appreciate you doing this. The paperwork, it's not nothing. What you're giving me something too. Bank wants to see a married man with a working partner before they'll talk about extending the note on this place. Otherwise I lose it by spring." His jaw tightened. "So don't go thinking you're the only one who needs this to work." The ranch house, when it came into view, was handsome under the dust. 2 stories, a wrap-around porch, paint peeling in long curls along the south side where the weather hit hardest. A dog loped out from behind the barn, circled the truck twice, and pressed its whole body against Marisol's legs the second she stepped down. "That's Biscuit," Declan said. "She likes everybody." Don't read into it. Inside, the house told its own story. A man who'd stopped noticing his own mess because there'd been no one to notice it for him. Dishes stacked in the sink, a coat still hanging on a hook by the door that was clearly not his size. "My sister's," he said, catching her looking. She used to come help out before she moved to Calgary. Got her own life now. He didn't mention a wife. Marisol didn't ask. Not yet. He showed her the room that would be theirs. For appearances, he explained, awkward, rubbing the back of his neck. Immigration would want proof of a real marriage if anyone ever came asking, and a rancher sleeping on his own couch for 2 years running was the kind of detail that got noticed in a small county. "I'll take the couch tonight," he said. "Give you space to settle." "You don't have to. I want to." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, whatever you're running from, you don't have to tell me, not till you're ready." She didn't answer that. She lay awake a long time listening to the windwork at the eaves, thinking about the man 2 provinces away who still believed he owned her, and wondering how long it would take him to find out she'd disappeared again. The work started before dawn, and Marisol matched it, step for step. She'd told Declan she didn't know ranching, and that was true, but she knew labor, knew how to make her hands useful so nobody looked too closely at her face. By the end of the first week, she could move cattle through a gate without flinching, could mend a fence line well enough that Declan stopped double-checking her knots. "You're stubborn," he told her one evening, both of them leaning on the corral rail, watching the herd settle for the night. "You say that like it's an insult." "I say it like I mean it as a compliment, and I'm bad at compliments." He glanced at her. "Where'd you learn to work like this? Different life?" She watched the horizon go orange, then violet. "I'll tell you sometime." "Not tonight." "Fair enough." It was the smallest things that started to shift something in her. The way he left coffee on the counter for her every morning before she was even awake, strong and black, because she'd mentioned once she liked it that way. The way he never raised his voice, not even the day she backed the truck into the propane tank and dented the bumper. The way he'd started saying my wife to the neighbors with something that wasn't performance anymore. Henry Dunmore from the next section over came by one Saturday with a case of beer and an opinion about everything. "Heard you got married quick, Whitfield," he said, eyeing Marisol over the fence. "Lucky man. Where you from originally around?" Marisol said, and smiled in a way that closed the subject. Declan noticed. He always noticed. That night, after Henry's truck had rattled off down the road, he found her, on the porch steps, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. "You don't owe me your whole story," he said, sitting beside her, careful to leave space between them. "But if there's something coming for you, Marisol, something I should know to keep this place safe, keep you safe, I'd rather hear it from you than find out the hard way." She looked at him a long moment, decided. "His name is Victor Kessler," she said quietly. "I worked for him, for his company, on paper. Off paper, it was something else, moving money, moving people, moving things that should never cross a border. I didn't understand what I was part of until I did, and by then leaving wasn't a request I could make." Her voice steadied even as her hands shook. "I got out 18 months ago, changed my name twice. He has resources most people can't imagine. Police on a payroll somewhere. I thought I was far enough." Declan didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You're safe here. You don't know that. I know I'm not letting anything happen to you." He said it simply, like a fact, like weather. "That's not nothing." She let her head rest against his shoulder, just for a moment, and for the first time since the bus pulled away from everything she used to know, Marisol Vega let herself believe it. October brought trouble in twin forms. The first came in a government sedan, 2 Canada Border Services officers, polite and thorough and entirely unconvinced. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Marisol had started leaving notes for Declan in the mornings, little teasing things about his terrible coffee mug collection, and asked questions designed to catch a lie. "How did you two meet?" "Through a mutual contact," Marisol said. "I needed to settle somewhere safe. Declan needed a partner for the ranch. It moved fast, too fast. Some might say, when you know," Declan said, "you know." The officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Inspector Reyes, flipped through her folder without looking up. "What side of the bed does your wife sleep on, Mr. Whitfield?" "Left side. Wakes before 5 most mornings, whether she needs to or not." He didn't hesitate. "Hums when she's cooking, old songs in Spanish. Doesn't think I notice." Marisol felt something catch in her throat that had nothing to do with the interview. "And you, Mrs. Whitfield, what does your husband do when he can't sleep?" "Goes out to check the horses, even when there's nothing wrong with them. Says it clears his head." She met Declan's eyes. "Comes back smelling like cold air and hay, and pretends he wasn't gone long." Inspector Reyes studied them both for a long moment, then closed her folder. "We'll be in touch," she said, which was not the same as "we believe you," and they both knew it. The second trouble came 2 days later, in the shape of a letter from the bank. Roland Voss, the loan officer who'd always treated Declan with a kind of distant, professional pity, called them in personally. "There's a development corporation interested in purchasing your note," he said, sliding a paper across his desk. "Kessler Holdings. They've offered very favorable terms to the bank." Marisol went still. "Kessler," Declan repeated, watching her face go pale. "As in, they want full repayment in 30 days. Voss said, oblivious. "If you can't meet it, the property reverts to them. It's all perfectly legal." Outside in the parking lot, Marisol pressed both hands flat against the truck and tried to breathe. "He found me," she said. "He's been circling for months, probably, waiting for the right leverage. This is it. This is him telling me he knows exactly where I am." "Then we don't run," Declan said. "We fight. You don't understand what he's capable of, then explain it to me." "Because I am not losing my family's land, and I am not losing you, to a man who thinks owning people is a business model." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not fear but resolve, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for 18 months finally loosened, just slightly. "Okay," she said. "Okay, let's fight." He came on a Tuesday night, headlights sweeping up the drive long after the cooperative meeting had ended and the other ranchers had gone home. Marisol knew the sound of that engine before she saw the car. Something about it lodged in her body the way certain sounds do when they belong to fear. Victor Kessler stepped out unhurried, expensive coat absurd against the dark fields, and smiled like a man who already considered the conversation won. "Marisol, you look well. Rural life agrees with you." His eyes slid to Declan. "And this must be the rancher. Brave of you, taking in another man's property. She's not anyone's property. Declan moved to stand beside her, not in front of her. She'd asked him once never to put himself between her and a threat, like she was something to be guarded, instead of someone who could stand on her own. And he'd remembered. "Cute," Kessler said. "Here's how this ends. You give me back what you took when you ran Marisol, or I finish what Cascade." "Sorry, Kessler Holdings started. This ranch disappears. Your reputation, your little farming co-op, all of it. And then you come back to me anyway, because you'll have nowhere left to go. I don't have anything of yours. You kept records. You always did, even when you pretended to be too frightened to think straight. Where are they?" "Safety deposit box in Lethbridge," Marisol said, and her voice did not shake. "Names, transaction logs, the shell accounts you ran through 3 provinces. If anything happens to me or to my husband, it goes straight to RCMP financial crimes. So you can't touch either of us without burying yourself." Kessler's smile thinned. "Bold claim for a woman with 1 suitcase and a borrowed last name. Test it," she said. "See what happens." For a long moment nobody moved. Somewhere behind them, Biscuit barked once at the strange car and went quiet. Kessler's eyes moved between them, calculating, the way men like him always calculated, looking for the angle that cost him least. 48 hours, he said finally. "Then I stopped being patient." He drove off into the dark, and Marisol's legs gave out the second the taillights vanished. Declan caught her before she hit the porch steps, lowered them both down together. "There's no safety deposit box," she said, the lie finally cracking open. "I gave everything I had to a settlement organization when I crossed over. They said they'd only release it if something happened to me. I have no way to prove any of it." "Then we don't need proof yet," Declan said, steady as ever. "We need 48 hours and a plan." The plan, when it came together, was Marisol's, built from 2 years of watching how a man like Kessler thought. They didn't go quiet. They went public. A reporter from the regional paper who'd already covered the cooperative's fight against corporate land grabs got the full story, off the record at first, then on it, with Inspector Reyes, who turned out to have her own long-standing file on Kessler Holdings, confirming just enough to make it real. By the time the 48 hours ran out, Victor Kessler's name was attached to a developing financial crimes inquiry spanning 3 provinces, and the offer to buy out Declan's loan had been quietly withdrawn by a bank suddenly very interested in distancing itself from anything connected to Kessler Holdings. He never came back to the ranch. Word reached them months later, secondhand, that he'd been arrested trying to cross into Montana with 2 passports that weren't his. Marisol cried when she heard, not from grief but from the strange disorienting relief of an ending she'd stopped believing she'd get to see. Winter settled over the ranch slow and complete, the way it always did in that part of Alberta, and Marisol found she didn't mind it the way she'd expected to. There was something steadying about the cold, about the rhythm of feeding cattle in the dark, and watching the sun come up pink over snow that stretched to the mountains. "Penny for your thoughts," Declan said, one evening, finding her on the porch wrapped in his old coat, watching her breath fog in the air. "I was thinking about the day I got off that bus," she said. "How sure I was you'd take one look and regret the whole arrangement." "I took one look and thought I'd married the most stubborn woman in the county." He sat beside her, close enough now that there was no careful space left between them. "Took me about a week to realize stubborn was exactly what I needed." "What changed your mind?" "You stayed when you didn't have to, even before you needed to." She leaned into him, finally let herself believe the word home belonged to her again. "I thought I'd spend my whole life running, looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next disaster to catch up. And now I think the bravest thing I ever did was stop." She tipped her face up to his. "You taught me that. You taught yourself that," he said. "I just stuck around long enough to watch." The barn light came on across the yard, Henry Dunmore's truck pulling in with the week's delivery for the cooperative, a dozen ranchers gathering the way they did now every Sunday, sharing labor and equipment and the particular comfort of people who'd chosen to build something together instead of alone. "We should go help," Marisol said, "in a minute." Declan pulled her closer, voice rough in a way she'd come to recognize and love. "I want to say thank you first, for getting off that bus. For staying, for fighting beside me when it would have been easier to run. You saved me too," she said. "You saw a person instead of a problem to manage." Nobody had done that for a long time. They kissed there on the porch with the cold biting at their cheeks and Biscuit circling impatiently at their feet. 2 people who'd been strangers a year ago, brought together by paperwork and necessity, who'd found something neither of them had been looking for and both of them had needed. "Come on," Marisol said finally, taking his hand, pulling him toward the barn and the lights and the life they'd built out of nothing but stubbornness and second chances. "Work doesn't stop just because we're happy." "Never does," Declan agreed, falling into step beside her. "That's the deal when you marry a rancher." "I'm not complaining." "Good," he said, "because this is exactly where I want to be." And together they walked toward the barn, toward the community gathering in the lamplight, toward a future neither of them had believed they'd get to keep, built in the end. Not on the lie they'd started with, but on everything true that had grown up underneath it.